The studio was buzzing with the usual energy of a live broadcast, but there was an undercurrent today that no one could quite name. The Views set, always bright and polished, with its warm tones and meticulously arranged table, seemed almost too pristine for what was about to unfold. Joy Behar sat at her usual spot, shuffling her cards with a nervous energy that she tried to mask with her trademark smirk. She had been on countless live shows, navigating contentious interviews with seasoned skill, but something about this segment felt different, heavier. Across the table sat Tom Hardy, his presence calm yet magnetic, the kind of quiet intensity that made people instinctively respect the space he occupied. The audience, sensing the tension, murmured softly, eyes flicking between the two of them, anticipating sparks. The segment opened with the usual pleasantries, small talk about the latest film, a few jokes tossed around, but Joy quickly shifted the energy, leaning forward with a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Tom, you've got this intense persona," she said, voice light but edged with curiosity. "Some people say you're intimidating. Is that true, or is it just a rumor that follows you around?" The audience laughed softly, a polite, anticipatory chuckle that mirrored the thrill of seeing a potential clash unfold. Tom's eyes lifted from the table, meeting hers with an even, measured gaze. "Intimidating?" he asked, his voice low and smooth, almost teasing. "I suppose it depends on the company." Joy's grin widened, convinced she was steering the conversation into playful territory. "Come on now," she said, leaning closer, "with the tattoos, the look, the whole brooding thing, you've got to admit it. People are a little wary of you at first glance, right?" The audience reacted immediately, a mixture of laughter and murmurs of agreement. Tom, however, remained perfectly still, his expression unreadable. "Anyone who fears me probably hasn't spent a day on set with me," he replied evenly, the words calm but carrying a weight that immediately shifted the dynamic. Joy, momentarily taken aback, laughed, though it sounded tighter than intended. She tried to maintain control, nudging the conversation forward with a sharper edge. "Well, maybe that's part of your charm. You've got this aura, this unpredictable energy. Does it ever intimidate your co-stars?" Tom's gaze hardened ever so slightly, though he didn't rise to her bait. "I don't intimidate. I expect honesty and professionalism. Frivolous remarks aimed at someone else don't get a pass just because they're meant to be funny." The audience stirred, sensing the subtle admonishment in his tone. Joy's cheeks flushed slightly, but she masked it with a chuckle. "Frivolous? I'm just trying to keep things lively, keep the audience entertained." Tom leaned forward slightly, his tone measured and unwavering. "Entertainment doesn't require embarrassment, and it certainly doesn't require diminishing someone else to make a point. Respect isn't optional." The air in the studio thickened. Even the co-hosts exchanged glances, a silent acknowledgement that the segment had taken a sharp, unexpected turn. Joy's smile faltered, her carefully constructed facade of confidence beginning to crack. The audience, sensing the change, quieted, their attention rapt. Joy tried to recover, leaning back slightly and waving her hands as if brushing off the weight of his words. "Oh, come on, Tom. I'm just having fun. I didn't mean to offend anyone." Tom's eyes locked on hers, steady and unwavering. "Fun shouldn't come at someone else's expense. If you want to entertain, do so without trying to undermine." His words were calm, but each one struck with precision. The audience reacted immediately, a collective intake of breath, some applause, some murmurs of approval. Joy's hands flew to her notes, gripping them a little too tightly. She tried to redirect the conversation, leaning forward with a sharper, almost defensive edge. "You think you're some kind of philosopher now, huh? You're going to sit there and lecture me?" Tom's response was slow, deliberate, and deadly in its simplicity. "I'm not lecturing. I'm pointing out the difference between speaking truthfully and trying to score points at someone else's expense. That's all." The audience was leaning forward in their seats now, sensing the intensity building to a crescendo. Even the crew behind the cameras paused, listening, waiting, as though the air itself held its breath. Joy's face had grown pink with a mix of anger and embarrassment. She was used to controlling conversations, turning moments into comedic victories, but Tom's calm and precise rebuttals left her off balance. Joy's voice rose slightly, tinged with incredulity. "Off balance? I've been doing this show for decades. I know how to handle guests. I know how to navigate tricky moments. And you just came in and flipped the whole table." Tom didn't blink. "I came in to speak honestly. You came in thinking this would be easy. That's the difference." The audience gasped softly, murmuring among themselves. Joy's hands clenched on the desk as she fought to regain control, but each attempt to inject humor or charm was met with calm, disarming clarity. Every word she tried to use as a weapon was deflected effortlessly, leaving her increasingly exposed. For several moments, the room seemed to shrink around them, the lights glaring down like spotlights on a stage where one woman's usual dominance had been quietly dismantled. Joy's breathing grew shallow, her mind racing to find a counter, to regain the upper hand, but Tom remained untouchable, polite, calm, and unyielding. Finally, Joy straightened, her hands flattening on the desk as she exhaled sharply. All right, she said, trying to regain composure. Her voice was tight, forced into a semblance of humor. You're a tough one, I'll give you that. You've got nerve. Tom's subtle smile returned, approving but reserved. It's not nerve, it's honesty and respect. The audience erupted in applause, louder this time, fully acknowledging the shift. Joy, momentarily disarmed, forced a small laugh, but her eyes betrayed the internal storm. For the first time in years, she felt genuinely outmaneuvered in front of a live audience. She had underestimated a guest, and the realization burned. As the segment drew to a commercial break, Joy stood abruptly, muttering under her breath, the tension radiating from her in sharp, visible waves. She stormed toward the side of the set, pacing as producers and co-hosts tried to follow, their voices calm but insistent. Her usual confidence had been stripped away, replaced by humiliation and frustration, a rare combination that left the studio buzzing with an almost tangible electricity. Even in the brief moments before the cameras cut, the audience and crew alike were whispering, sharing knowing glances. They had witnessed something rare, the familiar dynamic of Joy Behar's control shattered by a guest who wielded calm authority like a weapon. The energy in the studio was electric, thick with tension and the awe of a live moment no one would soon forget. By the time the screens flashed, commercial break, Joy had retreated behind the curtain, muttering angrily, the flush on her cheeks a visible marker of her bruised ego. Tom remained seated, relaxed, composed, as if he had simply observed the chaos unfold from a distance. The stagehands and producers exchanged worried glances, whispering about the segment they had just witnessed. And how it would undoubtedly dominate the headlines and social media in the coming hours. The moment the cameras cut to commercial, the tension in the studio didn't dissipate, it thickened. Joy Behar stormed behind the curtains, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor, the sound echoing like a drumbeat of anger and humiliation. She ran her hands through her hair, shaking her head as though trying to physically dislodge the sting of what had just happened. The producers followed cautiously, flanking her, their faces etched with concern. One of them, a young woman with a headset, spoke softly, trying to soothe her. Joy, just take a breath. You've got this under control. I don't have this under control. Joy snapped, spinning around with a flush of fury that reached her ears. He humiliated me, on my show, live. Every word I tried to land, he deflected, corrected, or turned back on me. I've never felt so small, so exposed, in all my life. Sunny Hostin and Whoopi Goldberg stepped up, exchanging worried glances. Sunny placed a hand gently on Joy's arm. Joy, it's just a guest. You can recover. Joy's voice was sharp, trembling with the edge of indignation. Do you hear yourself? You think it's just a guest? This isn't just a guest. This is Tom Hardy. He came in, calm, polite, controlled, and he systematically stripped away every ounce of my credibility in front of the entire world. She spun on her heel, pacing, fists clenched. The audience saw it, the viewers at home saw it, everybody saw it. There is no recovery from this. I can't sit there after that. I just can't. Whoopi stepped closer, voice gentle but firm, trying to anchor her friend. Joy, breathe. You're allowed to feel caught off guard. That happens to everyone, even you. You're human. This isn't the end of your career. I'm not talking about career, Whoopi. Joy exclaimed, her voice breaking. I'm talking about dignity. He didn't just answer questions, he humiliated me. He exposed me as someone who's all jokes and bravado, but no substance. I can't do this show anymore. The producers and co-hosts exchanged tense glances. Nobody wanted to argue, nobody dared. The weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Even the studio crew paused their preparations for the next segment, sensing the gravity of the moment. Tom Hardy, standing quietly nearby, observed with his trademark calm. His expression was neutral, unreadable, but there was a quiet intensity in his eyes. I didn't come here to humiliate you, he said softly, his voice low and controlled. I was just speaking truthfully, honestly. I didn't intend to push you this far. Joy whirled toward him, eyes flashing with anger and disbelief. Push me? You don't push. You destroyed me. You made me look foolish in front of millions. Every line I tried, every joke I attempted, it all fell flat. I can't go back out there. My credibility is gone. My